Welcome to Come and See, your podcast for finding truth in a world of chaos. Brought to you by All for Jesus Living Waters Ministry. With host and founder Richard Case and co-host and retreat leader Kathy Ricconi. Jesus reminds us to watch for the signs of his return. Today we will explore further what we are seeing in our times that line up with what signs he said would indicate the potential of the end and his return. We will also discuss the practical meaning of this as we watch and as a remnant prepare as he so leads. And now your host, Richard Case.
Well, good morning, Kathy. Here we are on End Times Friday.
Good morning.
And we're having a good time really processing through this whole understanding of what's going to happen at the end and the signs and wonders that we're supposed to pay attention to. And again, why Jesus said pay attention and understand it and keep pursuing it. And interesting enough, particularly in the book of Revelation, remember John was asked, I'm going to take you up and I'm going to show you what is to come and write about it.
Right.
So he visibly got to see it. So he came forward, and we already know, again, we've reiterated this because we live in the year 2021. Well, it's at least 2,000 years later. And he's describing things that he sees 2,000 years later, and it would be things like airplanes and missiles and iPhones and computers and
right.
telephones, all this stuff that he would have had no reference for at all. So he had to see them and then try to write about, okay, that looks like this. And he didn't even fully understand it, nor did God explain to him and say, well, that's a computer. He said, you're not going to be able to understand it anyway. So
right.
Just trust me, you're observing what I'm showing you. So he's writing these things out. In the book of Revelation particularly, I actually just had a person that talked to me that he said he was going to read it from the back to the front so that he could kind of backtrack of, okay, this happens, and this is the end conclusion, and then this, and then what's before that. And I said, you got to be careful with that because the book isn't written sequentially.
Right.
So you really can't, interesting enough, you can't read front to back or back to front and look at it, well, then this happened before that, because it's not structured that way. It's rather structured with John observing things. And then he
just kind of saying, oh, and hey, I saw this.
Yeah.
And then there was this.
And then he and it's really beautifully done, because it would be just like we do it, is that, okay, wait a minute. You just showed me that. Could you go into that a little bit deeper? Tell me more about that. So he winds up the book in these various sections, goes back and backtracks. So it's really going backwards and say, okay, let me give you some more depth about this question. And that's why you got to be careful not to look at it sequentially. But because of that, we have curiosity.
Right.
And what does that look like? And so we laid out, Daniel started out with 70 weeks. And he describes 69 until Messiah, Christ. And there's 1 week left. 1 week is 7 years. There's 7 years left in the sequence of all that he was shown, and then basically it's at the very end is a 7-year period. And what's called between the 69th week, which is Christ, and now going into the 7th week, which will be the tribulation, is called the church age.
Right.
And it's indeterminate. Nobody gives a specificity to how long that lasts, which is why Christ said, pay attention, it's soon, but not yet. And the interesting thing is that, well, soon implies, well, then it could be during my lifetime, right? Yes.
Right.
Does it mean it's going to be that time? Not necessarily.
No.
So it's pay attention, be aware of it. And again, I think the biggest piece of the awareness is recognize that there's a cosmic spiritual battle going on
Mm-hmm.
between the enemy who has control of the world and God over the essence of the world and the population of the world, and that it's an ongoing battle. And that's why I think he says keep paying attention, is don't lose that perspective. That there's a battle going on, and you're going to live in the middle of a battle, that the enemy is working really hard to gather back the complete control of earth. He already has control of it, but not complete control, because why? God, through his kingdom, is superior. And that's why there's believers on earth, it talks about the Holy Spirit restraining the power of the enemy. Why? Because it's superior to it. So even when there's a remnant or just a few people who are walking with the Spirit, there's still a restraint on the complete takeover, but that's what the enemy would like to do.
Right.
And so Daniel said there's 1 week left. Remember, 1 week is called the tribulation. Now, the tribulation is trouble. The word means trouble. And in essence, there's two levels of trouble. One is it's going to bring trouble on earth. And actually, we've been discussing the wrath of God, which brings that trouble.
Right.
And then there's trouble for the remnant or the believers that don't take the mark of the beast.
Right.
And if we're still
And
here,
navigating life in that season, potentially.
and if we're still here, which implies that we are, that we're not raptured. We talked about the different possibilities of rapture, but if we're still here, there is trouble on our part, because the Antichrist, which we'll actually read here, and the beast comes against it, comes against believers to try to cause them trouble. So remember, it's a 7-year period of trouble, tribulation. The first 3.5 years to the world looks like fantastic economic, fantastic life that is actually what they would consider, is this good? They would say this is fantastic, because everything is working well and we're all being blessed. We're getting financial gain. Everything is working really, really well.
And this is while we're under this one world government.
Under one world government,
Yep.
that appears to be the answer. And by the way, it appears so much to be the answer that when God's wrath comes, which is what we've described, none of the people view it as, well, we got to repent and follow God. It's no, the Antichrist is God. And if he could just get rid of Israel's God, then everything will go back to being, fantastic. So everything flips, and evil to good, good to evil. So the characters that we set up are the harlot. The harlot is the creator of the beast, and the harlot, if we're in that time now, and by the way, the harlot, I believe, has been operating for centuries.
Right.
And they're infinitely patient. But the goal is one world government, and it's known publicly. Rothschild Group, which owns all the central banks, the CFR, Council for Foreign Relations. Their purpose is one world government. Skull and Bones out of Yale Group, one world government. Globalism is now being promoted by the G20. Let's head toward everybody getting together and making it work together.
Right. The World Economic Forum, all of that.
It's all public information. So the harlot is working to create the system of the beast, which is a structure, and I call it a system, a one world government that functions under a way of basically now governing or ruling over the entire world. And that's the beast. The beast is 10 structures, and it looks like there's some corporate structure to that. 10 heads that lead these, and then the 10 go from 10 to 7 to 5 to 3 to 2 to 1. The one remaining is the Antichrist.
Okay.
And he becomes in power by elevating up to running the beast. And the Antichrist has a false prophet, which is another player, a Christian leader who actually moves everybody to worship him. He legitimizes him
Correct.
as God. Yes, it is God. And we know behind the scene is the dragon or Satan, who
Mm-hmm.
is getting everybody to try to worship what would be his son, the Antichrist. The false prophet would be equivalent to the Holy Spirit, and the Satan would be the leader,
Mm-hmm.
or the head. And so that's their false trinity,
Oh,
to
interesting. Yeah.
try to establish everybody to worship the Antichrist as God,
Mm-hmm.
and eliminate all real believers on earth, so that there's none left. If there's none left, well, then God doesn't have access anymore to the world, and that's
Mm-hmm.
the battle that we're in, which is why I think he says pay attention. Okay, now the question comes up, and you got this question.
Yeah.
Okay, you've discussed this. Could you tell us a little bit again and more about the beast, and what the heck is that, and what's the difference between the beast and the Antichrist, and what about the mark of the beast? I thought it was the mark of the Antichrist.
Right.
Okay, well, let's look at this, and let's go back, and it's okay. We can revisit this, and we're
Yeah, I think
happy
it's
to do
great
so.
to revisit this, especially because new listeners have joined in, and if they haven't backed up and heard the whole thing, these are some pretty important facets that they
Yeah.
need to understand.
So let's first of all, Daniel describes this when he says, I see the four beasts, and the fourth beast is the one that comes during the tribulation. So let's look at his description, Daniel 7, 19 through 28. Daniel
Sure.
7, 19 through 28.
Then I desired to know the truth about the fourth beast, which was different from all the rest, exceedingly terrifying, with its teeth of iron and claws of bronze, and which devoured and broke in pieces and stamped what was left with its feet, and about the 10 horns that were on its head, and the other horn that came up, before which 3 of them fell, the horn that had eyes and a mouth and spoke great things, and that seemed greater than its companions. As I looked, this horn made war with the saints and prevailed over them, until the Ancient of Days came, and judgment was given for the saints of the Most High. And the time came when the saints possessed the kingdom. Thus he said, as for the fourth beast, there shall be a fourth kingdom on earth, which shall be different from all the kingdoms, and it shall devour the whole earth, and trample it down, and break it to pieces. As for the 10 horns, out of this kingdom 10 kings shall rise, and another shall rise after them. And he shall be different from the former ones, and shall put down 3 kings. He shall speak the words against the Most High, and shall wear out the saints of the Most High, and shall think to change the times and the law, and they shall be given into his hand for a time, times, and half a time. But the court shall sit in judgment, and his dominion shall be taken away, to be consumed and destroyed to the end. And the kingdom and the dominion and the greatness of the kingdoms under the whole heaven shall be given to the people of the saints of the Most High. His kingdom shall be an everlasting kingdom, and all dominions shall serve and obey him. Here is the end of the matter. As for me, Daniel, my thoughts greatly alarmed me, and my color changed, but I kept the matter in my heart.
Yeah. So he says, now the fourth beast is, at the end. And remember, he calls it a beast. And what does he say about the beast? He says that it's exceedingly dreadful, and it devours and breaks in pieces and tramples everything under its feet. And we'll read this as well in Revelation. But basically, and then he, by the way, he says that he is attempting to change the times and the law.
Right. And truly trampling everything that was how it existed.
Yeah.
Right.
So that the reason it's different, he said it's a different looking thing than the other 3. The other 3 were nations who conquered the world. And it was Persia, then it was the Greeks, then it was the Roman Empire. That set up their one world government at the known world of running the show. But
so those 3 we can see in history having already taken place.
They've already taken place.
And now there's room for the fourth beast to come in.
And he said it's different than those 3. Those 3 were all out of national governments centered in Greece or Persia or Rome. And it was set up by the nation that they represented. Well, this one's going to be different. It's different from that. It's not going to be a nation. It's going to be some structure with 10 heads that basically take over and trample the world system. So it becomes a system that is 10 structures that rule differently. So it's not a democracy. It's not America, Germany. It's not even the EU right now, that is still comprised of nations. And those nations send delegates to their ruling body that basically gives some policy and some law, but you still remain sovereign unto your country. France, Germany, Italy, Spain, etc. They're still sovereign. In this case, it won't be delegates that we send to a place. It'll be the place, the system, taking over and running the one world government, which with a new economic system, because it said it tramples the old one, and in order for it to function, it gives one new system to do it. And we have a little bit of a picture of this. New York City right now has established a system for handling all of its citizens. And the way it is that the requirement is vaccination.
Right.
If you're vaccinated, and we could equate that to a not the mark of the beast, but similar to what it is going to look like,
and kind of a desensitization to stepping into that.
Right. That if you want to go out, Australia, by the way, has done it to an extreme. The entire nation of Australia has done it to an extreme. You literally, if you aren't vaccinated, you can't leave your house.
Right.
The only reason you could ever leave your house is to go to the grocery store, if they allow you to come in. Mostly they'll deliver to you, or you got to go to a doctor. You can't do anything. You can't gather. You can't go to church. You can't do anything if you're not vaccinated. Well, that's a system that is put in a way of managing their population under what would be equivalent to one world government. That they remember they're ruling the world. So he said it's different. It's a beast. It's not the Antichrist. The Antichrist, he said, the little horn comes up out of that 10 and winds up being the ultimate leader of the beast, but not the beast. So don't equate the beast with the Antichrist per se.
Okay.
The Antichrist will head the beast, but it's not the beast. The beast is the one world system. Okay, let's go over to Revelation 13 and read verses 1 to 18. It's a chapter, but it gives us a lot of description of this. Revelation 13, 1 to 18.
And I saw a beast rising out of the sea with 10 horns and 7 heads, with 10 diadems on its horns and blasphemous names on its heads.
Okay, now, by the way, remember Daniel? He said it starts out with 10, but three are missing.
Right.
Okay, so here we go. That was written in 400 BC.
Wow.
Here we go. John's writing this in 90 AD. So this is about almost 500 years later.
Okay.
And he says, when I see the beast and I pick up the beast, it has 7 heads. So the 3 that Daniel talked were already taken care of. He's picking it up from that point.
Interesting. Okay.
And then 10 horns, which means that the structure is still in place. I still see the structure in place.
Right.
But it's now, instead of being led by 10 heads,
it's led by 7.
It's only led by 7. So
okay.
Keep going. Go ahead.
Okay. And the beast that I saw was like a leopard. Its feet were like a bear's, and its mouth was like a lion's mouth. And to it the dragon gave his power and his throne and great authority. One of its heads seemed to have a mortal wound, but its mortal wound was healed, and the whole earth marveled as they followed the beast. And they worshipped the dragon, for he had given his authority to the beast, and they worshipped the beast, saying, "Who is like the beast, and who can fight against it?" And the beast was given a mouth uttering haughty and blasphemous words, and it was allowed to exercise authority for 42 months. It opened its mouth to utter blasphemies against God, blaspheming his name and his dwelling, that is, those who dwell in heaven. Also, it was allowed to make war on the saints and to conquer them, and authority was given it over every tribe and people and language and nation, and all who dwell on the earth will worship it. Everyone whose name has not been written before the foundation of the world in the book of of in the book of life of the Lamb who was slain. If anyone has an ear, let him hear. If anyone is to be taken captive, to captivity he goes. If anyone to be slain with the sword he must be slain. Here is a call for the endurance of the faith of the saints.
Okay, then keep going.
Then I saw another beast rising out of the earth. It had 2 horns like a lamb, and it spoke like a dragon. It exercises all the authority of the first beast in its presence and makes the earth and its inhabitants worship the first beast, whose mortal wound was healed. It performs great signs, even making fire come down from heaven to earth in front of the people. And by the signs that it is allowed to work in the presence of the beast, it deceives those who dwell on earth, telling them to make an image for the beast that was wounded by the sword and yet lived. And it was allowed to give breath to the image of the beast, so that the image of the beast might even speak and might cause those who would not worship the image of the beast to be slain. It also causes all, both small and great, both rich and poor, both free and slave, to be marked on the right hand or the forehead, so that no one can buy or sell unless he has the mark, that is, the name of the beast or the number of its name. This calls for wisdom. Let the one who has understanding calculate the number of the beast, for it is the number of a man, and his number is 666.
Okay. So he talks again about the beast. And then out of the beast arises the Antichrist, who then takes over power and control of the beast. And he said the authority of that comes from who? Satan. To get what? And it says here several times, so that everybody on earth does what? Now, and the merger, so to speak, you could look at the merger of the Antichrist, the person, and the system. And it now is embodied in that person of the Antichrist, so that everybody does what? Worships him.
Worships him, okay.
As God. And so when it says worship the beast, it's only when the Antichrist steps into that final leadership role that it becomes, in a sense, now synonymous with, it wasn't the beast.
Okay.
But it became synonymous with the beast, because now I'm the head of it. Not only am I the head of it, but I've now taken the beast, the one world system, to a new level. And that is what? This new system that I'm now the head of is to be worshiped because I am God. And it goes from there into the person. So that, like, for example, Christianity.
Okay.
Or let's say Buddhism or Islam. The worship of that theology, the worship of that way of doing life, which is a system, is embodied in Christianity, is embodied in Jesus.
Okay.
We worship Jesus. Buddhism worships Buddha. Muhammad is to be worshipped of Islam. And it's a system that has become synonymous with the one leading it and worshipped. So it went from one world government and one economic system to operate, and it was a system set up with 10 structures and 10 heads. And it describes the 10 goes from 10 to 7 to 5 to 3 to 2 to 1.
Right.
And the 1
and that marks
go ahead.
That marks the beginning of the tribulation, correct? When that system comes into
when the
play.
system comes in place. And out of that system is the Antichrist. He's there, and he rises up during this first 3.5 years, where he then becomes synonymous with the beast. So it says we worship the beast. Well, we're really worshiping the Antichrist, because remember, it's the man who's now running the system.
who's now running the system. So when you look at the mark of the beast, I'm thinking, as this person's questions come up, when you look at the mark of the beast, that happens at the beginning as the beast comes in, correct?
Yeah, it'll happen. It'll happen at the beginning, and then it's reinforced with absoluteness that now you have to worship the beast, and you got to have the mark of the beast, who now is synonymous with the Antichrist. So it doesn't start out to be the mark of an Antichrist. It starts out to be the mark of the system that then is translated ultimately in the worship of that person who's now synonymous with the beast, because he's the head of the beast. So are you worshiping Christianity? Are you worshiping Christ? They start to become synonymous. So the beast and the Antichrist are now synonymous, because he's the one heading it, leading it. And not only is he a human leader over something, like Caesar in Rome.
Right.
Well, the emperor of Rome was the head of Rome, and he had to be worshipped. Not only is he that, and nobody ever was asked that Caesar was God. They still said there's gods up there,
right?
And we're just the human representation of the system of the Roman Empire.
But now 3.5 years in, that changes in this case.
It changes, and he becomes, I am God. Now you worship me. So that's why it's different than all the other systems, is because they were all human beasts. This one sets itself up as a spiritual beast to be worshipped and let them control everything, because they think he does. So it starts out with the harlot creates the beast, the system. The system has in it these 10 heads, one of which is the Antichrist. He rises to the top of that and now runs it, leads it, and tells people to worship him. And now he is synonymous with the beast. So it starts out as a system. It comes embodied by him as a person. And that's why it says the name of that is a man, and his number is 666. So it's a person that now is the beast. And it's really interesting how that floats together.
Fascinating. Okay, that's good review. And then part of that question that came through then, and I know we talked about this question before from another viewer, but I think just to recap a little on that, is then how, especially if you look at the timing of that, could you not then take the mark of the beast and not actually be worshiping the Antichrist? That's the question that was posed. And I couldn't remember the episode to send the person back to hear the full explanation. So that's why we're giving this explanation again. And we thought everyone could use hearing it again anyway. Yeah.
And it's always it's always people saying, is there a loophole?
Is there any way around this?
is there a loophole so that when the tribulation comes, I'm going to have to join the economic system. Isn't that okay?
Right.
And that's not really worshiping the beast, because I haven't worshipped the person of the beast yet. And no, it's the mark.
Right. Well, and sometimes it is them looking, the loophole, but then sometimes it is also truly, I don't want to be fooled, and I want to make sure that I know what the Bible says on this, so that I don't do something without recognizing it is what it is.
Yeah.
So I think there's also an honest pursuit of that as well sometimes.
Yeah. So let's go back to the Jews. They were God's people. How were they marked?
They were marked, talked about on their foreheads, and, put his word around on your foreheads, on your wrists, around your neck, all of that sort of thing, which I think is fascinating that we hear that we see the same things with the mark of the beast.
Yeah. So it's not, that you plaster the entire Bible on your forehead.
Right.
It's that you are living it out. With I'm a follower of Yahweh, Yehovah, Elohim. I'm a follower of Him, and my life, because I'm living it completely with my mind and my heart and my soul, and I put it on my doorpost where I know that as I go in and go out, I'm going to live this out, and I'm marked by that. People know that I follow him as opposed to not following him.
Right.
And there's a mark of that. You're marked with that. There's also a mark of circumcision, that the males were circumcised. Okay, what was that a sign of?
That was the sign of covenant.
Of covenant. You're blessed to be a blessing, and there's a mark to that that demonstrates that you're part of my people. So it's both for males, it was a visible mark. And then for the nation, particularly the women and children and everybody else, is, are you living it out? And you're marked by me because you say, no, I follow God, I follow Yahweh.
Right.
And now it's marked, you're marked by who you follow. Paul writes about this in Colossians. He said, when you die go to death with Christ, and then you're raised again with him, he says you're marked with circumcision. It's interesting. Circumcision of what?
Of the heart.
Of the heart.
Yeah.
It's obvious that you're following Christ, and now you have the mark, because that's who you're following. So the mark is associated with who do you follow.
Okay.
Okay, so let's just take it in its pure sense. If I'm marked with anything other than Christ, what am I doing? If I'm marked
You're against him.
I'm against him because I'm following. I'm following them.
Right.
I'm not following God. So that we can't separate. Well, yeah, I can take the mark of the beast because it's just an economic thing, but I'm not really worshiping. Yes, you are. Because you've decided I'm following that over following God.
Right.
Now, by the way, we're going to get into this as we continue.
Which is a choice. That is worship, to make that choice.
Yeah, it is a choice that, do I follow the system of the world or not? And we have great examples of it. Actually, Daniel himself. Daniel was captured. He's still marked as a Jew. I'm still part of God's family. He's part of the remnant. Where does he get captured to? Gets captured to Babylonia. They say you gotta learn the system. Okay. You gotta learn the language. Okay. He does, no problem. Then it says you gotta eat food given to idols. That's part of our system.
Right.
The beast is Babylonia. Part of our system is you gotta eat food given to idols, because that's what we worship, is idols. We don't worship Yahweh, we worship idols. The beast isn't worshiping God, is completely setting up the one world government in opposition to God. Okay, what did Daniel do?
That's where he drew the line. He knew God had told him not to do that, so he stood firm on that, asked God what to do, and he presented what God said, that as something he was going to stand on.
Yeah, I can't do that. And follow your piece of your system just because it's available to me. Because that piece says, I'm not following God, I'm following the system. So when you take the mark of the beast, yes, it's a system. It's specifically saying, and I believe there'll be even things in there about it that will be beliefs that you stand on or willing to do that is completely anti-God. And it won't, I don't think it'll be fuzzy. It's not just economic. It's primarily economic because that's what they use. But it'll be, no, you agree to follow everything in here. And in there will be a rejection of something that will be biblical.
Right.
And it won't be fuzzy. And God will say, no, you can't take that. By the way, and he goes on, he's going to say later here, when we get into his wrath, my wrath comes against everybody that takes the mark of the beast. So it's not just, well, you took the mark, but you didn't. He didn't say, you took the mark, but you didn't worship. Right. No, you walked away from me. Right. Because you didn't follow my instructions. So the mark of the beast isn't to be, well, can I take that anyway as long as I don't worship the Antichrist? No.
Right.
The mark of the beast gets assimilated into the mark of the Antichrist by definition, because he winds up synonymous with the beast.
And leading it,
and
right.
leading it. So no, the answer is no. Is God specifically says, do not take the mark of the beast. And you got to have spiritual discernment to know what that is. Now, by the way, see, I don't think it'll be that fuzzy. So like, for example, right now, I get a lot of questions. Is the vaccine the mark of the beast?
Right.
No, it's not. Why? Well, because it's not universal. It's not following one world government per se. Is it a precursor to the mark of the beast? I think it is. That it's trying to desensitize us. That there will be a time when the only way you can function is to have this passport, to have this mark, to have this electronic symbol that allows you to do buy and selling. And I think it's a representation of that, which is why, because we've now seen it, I think God has said, do you kind of see the signs?
How this could happen?
How this now could happen. We can now see, I can see how this could work now. Before, that was one of my big questions. Mark of the beast is universal, and everybody willingly does it.
Right.
And everybody gives up their sovereignty. How does that work? I can't see it work. There's too much independence in the world to do that. And then COVID hits, and then now the vaccine hits, and it's and again, a lot of people that are being told by God, take the vaccine. A lot of people are saying no. This is one of the things, actually, I'm working with a lot of people right now about the issue of division.
Right.
That is causing division because I'm so into my position that I want to come against everybody who isn't. Well, that's not the body of Christ. It's wait a minute.
And you look at the emphasis that Jesus put on the unity of the body of Christ, and that is how people would see him and know Jesus as the unity of his believers.
That's right.
So we need to really be careful about that.
Yeah. And again, and just to, I'll go off on a slight sidetrack here. There's pharmaceuticals that people take. They've been proven. They've been, they've gone through the FDA requirement of 7 years, and they found out all the side effects. And they say it works for this, and it doesn't work for that. And now they offer it. This can be things like, blood pressure medicine against cholesterol. Hey, you got this lung issue. Take this drug. So is a drug evil per se? No. What happens? And this is happening over the entire body of Christ. Some people are being told by God, take that medicine. That's healthy for you. That's good for you. That's going to help you. That's part of my healing process. I gave technology. I gave it.
Right.
Other people, and I have a lot of people that say, that my doctor offered to me a cholesterol medicine, and God told me, you don't need to take that. I don't want you to take it. Take it somewhere. Okay, now we don't have division around that.
Right.
Because, if you feel led to take it, great. If you don't feel led to take it, great. Itself isn't evil. Interesting enough, the only thing evil would be if you disobey what God says.
Right.
So when it comes to the vaccine, which is, get caught up in this whole political issue of what it is, what it isn't, if you've been led by God to take it, good for you. If somebody else says, well, I've been led not to take it, good for you.
Right.
We can still
be obedient to God.
We can still be in unity about it because it's not absolute. Now, when the mark of the beast comes, that'll be absolute.
Right.
It'll be no. I'm telling you, hey, just like Daniel, you and your friends, no. No, you cannot eat food given to idols. That's against me. No, you can't do it. I've allowed you to participate in the system up until then. Don't do it. And that's what's going to happen with the mark of the beast, is there's going to be something to say, you have to agree to this. And God has already set up. That's why I think he laid it out, which is why I think probably we're still here. because he makes such a big point out of this, is
Out of us paying attention.
don't take the mark of the beast. If we're not here, what do we care?
Right.
Yeah, probably we're going to be here, and we're going to have to deal with this choice, which is about what the remnant is all getting ready to do. Is do we have a strength of community around us? Do we going to be able to handle living in this place? And so the mark of the beast is don't worry that, well, yeah, but I don't worship the Antichrist, so I can still take it. No, it's don't take it,
right?
Because you're opposite of worshiping and following me. And I'm telling you, God's speaking, don't take the mark of the beast, because you're saying to me, well, yeah, but it's convenient, so I think I'll take it. I'll just be careful not to worship it. He said, by you taking it, you are worshiping it.
And I think there's such importance, Rich and I talk all the time about abiding and just how essential that is to walking in God's best. But this is one of those things. When this comes, we want to be found abiding because that is where the wisdom and the discernment is going to come from as well. If we're walking with him, abiding with him daily, it's not going to be fuzzy. His spirit will make truth known to us.
Yeah. And that's why what we're trying to help people is to join the remnant. And the remnant is really simple. I just have a heart to follow God. I don't need to predict anything per se. I just need to have a heart to follow God. There are a couple things about it, and I think it's important today, partly because even if we're not in the actual end, which remember is still a possibility, we are in a time where the world is getting upside down. And everything is changing culturally, economically, spiritually, emotionally. Everything is completely changing from anything that we've ever experienced, even in the history of the United States. If we as Americans and people over in Europe or Asia, this is a different time, and the forces are completely different than we've ever experienced before. And I think it's accelerating with the issue of the governments. Like, for example, my problem with the vaccine isn't the vaccine, it's that the government is trying to force everybody to take it.
Right.
I think that that's not of God, because why? Because there's other alternatives. It's not an absolute solution by evidence that people have the vaccine still get COVID. That means that what else could we do? Well, there's other options to that. And the world that I'd like to live in would like to be, okay, I understand. You're offering that as a solution, that's fine. Would you give me the choice of whether I want to or I don't, so that I can live in a way, because there are healthy alternatives to that. So what I'm bothered by is what I see is, there's such a movement to make it a forced rule, what's called a mandate, that no matter what you think or believe, or even if there is alternatives, I'm going to make you do this. That's where my problem is personally. And then secondly is I can see, I can see now how the one world government can come about. Because they actually force things that say, this is it. You either do this or you're not going to participate in it. Well, even if this isn't the end, that for sure is happening.
Right.
And it's going to get trickier and trickier and more difficult and more difficult. So what I think is why we're trying to help you is, one is have a heart to follow God. Because why? He's got all the answers.
Right.
So let's go seek him. I believe he'll give us the strength to manage through it, even if we don't participate in that economic system. That he'll give us an alternative to that.
Right. And not just to manage through it, but to manage through it with joy and peace.
Right.
And wisdom and righteousness. So it's not just we can shore up and make it.
Yeah.
But it's a shore up, and he's walking with you, and where he is, there is joy. So it's not a hopeless walk into by any stretch.
That's right. And again, because this talks about martyrdom, our example is Stephen. He was martyred, but he got martyred in joy. And it looks like because in his it was stoning, which when you're stoned, you're physically not even able to talk. Well, what was he doing? He was calm. He said, I see Jesus, and Father, forgive them.
Right.
And I get to come. He was talking calmly, and you could see that he had joy in his heart because, hey, I'm coming home to Jesus. I think there's something about that even when we're martyred, that there's if we're approaching it as a follower of Christ, a true follower of Christ, there's a release from the physical pain of that. That there's something else that's given to us while we go through it. We can even do that in joy, so that the remnant that will live in the beginning of the tribulation, if we're there, we will still have joy. And
Right.
God's going to say, I'm going to show you what that looks like and how that feels like. And so the way I look at it is, again, even if we're not in the end, we're going to go through a very difficult time. And I want to be part of the remnant. Why? Well, because God says, I'm still going to give you joy. I'm still going to bless you to make you a blessing. Don't worry. That doesn't restrict me from doing that. And by the way, if it is the end, I may need to prepare you. I need to have you have community around you. I need to have you assist each other. And this question that came up, what about the mark of the beast? Well, our community, who's part of the remnant, it'll be absolute. This is it, don't do it. This is it, don't do it. And you'll know that you know that you know, and it won't be fuzzy. So that when when Daniel and his friends, well, here, eat food given to idols. See, Daniel and his friends they came together. No. God's saying no. Worship the idol or get thrown in the furnace. No. We're willing to get thrown in the furnace because God said no. And it was a community that had a clarity about that. It wasn't, well, maybe, maybe no, maybe we should. I guess we could. God will still, nope. I'm telling you, this is clear, and we need that community around us to, I believe, two things. One is to enjoy the difficult things coming up, which is I think for sure is going to happen. If this is the end, which is possible, we need that wisdom, that insight, that strength around us to lead us into God's best. So as we've talked about, the reasons that we're trying to explain all this is that, there is a beast. The Antichrist is coming from the beast. He becomes synonymous with the beast because it becomes him. The system becomes him, and we worship. The world is intended to worship him. And the false prophet tells everybody to worship him and take the mark of the beast and be satisfied with it. So we need to have that clarity and understanding. We've talked a lot about it today, which now we're already at the end of our time. We didn't get to talking about God's wrath, but I think it's really healthy to be a reminder of where is everything. And our encouragement to everybody is, even a question you have about taking the mark of the beast, isn't it okay if? Take that to God. And go to God, get a people around you to help clarify for us, well, exactly what is this going to be, and how does this relate, and what if I'm trying not to worship that, but I want to join the economic system? How does that work? Well, go to God. And that's what we're saying. Learn to go to God, get people around you, process through. These are really important questions
that God desires to answer.
And I believe ultimately those are the decisions we're going to have to make. But I think what God is doing today is what I call separating the wheat from the chaff. He's getting us in a position, well, let me give you wisdom for today. In this crazy world that we're living in now, and I'm going to have you learn to live in joy, to live in peace, to live in shalom, to live in the covenant while you're going through this crazy stuff going on in the world. And by the way, one of the things I need you to do, everybody says to we children, get a community around you. You got to have a community around you. This is not intended to be faced alone, and you need to understand the decisions I'll give you today for how to live out the life in a very difficult place as you learn this. which is what I think we're getting trained
like a training ground.
A training ground.
Yeah.
Is if the end is coming, or you need to teach your kids and your grandkids that maybe they're the ones that are going to face it. I'm getting you ready for this, because you're going to have to practice this.
Right.
And that's why I think we have some more time. And he's saying, that's why, hey, Rich and Kathy, I want you to speak about this. Because I'm inviting people to the remnant. They've got to follow me now and learn how to do that well. That's what we've talked about.
So that they're ready for when it does come.
That's why we're not exclusively just talking about the end. We've so far talked about the whole ability of what does it mean to abide? What does it mean to discern and follow God's will? We're in another series called How Do You Overcome Worry, Fear, and Anxiety? Because guess what? It's getting more intense.
Right.
Well, we got to learn this, and this is why we're so committed to it. So we're at the end of our time, and we wish hope you had a good discussion.
Thank you for digressing and hitting this question, though, because I think I've heard it from a few fronts lately, and I think it's a good thing for us to come back and be reminded of. So thank you so much.
Yeah, and continue to send in your questions like that. We're happy to backtrack.
Yeah.
To spend a little bit more time on it. This is what we're all about. We're not in any rush, and we don't have an agenda to get through. If you need to talk about something, or you want to revisit or ask a question about it, we're happy to do it.
Absolutely.
And it really solidifies all of us to keep understanding, well, how does that work? And what does that mean? And what about this? And that's how we grow together. And we want you to send in your questions. So put it on the YouTube, or questions@afjministry.com, questions@afjministry.com, and we'll be happy to answer them, like we did for this person that got to Kathy. And we'd love to do it, and wish you well. And we'll continue the series next Friday. And we're going to keep talking about God's wrath. And if another question comes up, we'll deal with that. So we're having fun. We're having fun doing it.
Absolutely. Thanks so much for joining us, everyone. Have a wonderful weekend, and we'll see you Monday.
Yeah, we'll see you Monday.
Thank you for joining us for today's episode of Come and See, your podcast for truth in a world of chaos. Brought to you by All for Jesus Living Waters Ministry. Send us your questions and comments, and tune in tomorrow for more answers to your personal questions about living life in God's truth. Remember, God's will is best and none better. His truth brings peace in this world of chaos.